Hello, and welcome to this evening's program, When Women Rise Up. My name is Sue O, and I am the Senior Vice President of Education, Exhibitions, and Community Engagement at the Natural History Museums of Los Angeles County. And I am happy to share this program with you. So in 2020, the museum was in process of developing the exhibition Rise Up LA, A Century of Votes for Women. This exhibition highlighted women across Los Angeles County who advocated for not only women's voting rights, but who also fought for change for their families and communities. Last spring, after the museum closed its door to the public, we created an online exhibition featuring these unique stories, activities, and related programs such as these. But we are so happy to be able to share that our museum doors will be open again on April 1st. And we are excited to welcome you back so you can see this exhibition in person. This evening's program will be with LA County Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell from District 2 and NHMLAC President and Director Dr. Lori Bettison-Varga. They will reflect on this historic year for women in politics and share their thoughts on the importance of inspiring women to be civically engaged at all ages. So be sure to participate and engage in the chat via YouTube. We will be taking questions from the audience toward the end of the conversation. But first, we want to share with you a behind the scenes of Rise Up LA Century for Women with Sarah Crawford, exhibition developer preview. So you have to come back. So here it is, Rise Up LA.
Hi, my name is Sarah Crawford, and I'm the Senior Manager of Exhibition Design and Development at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. I wanted to take you on a walk today through Rise Up LA, A Century of Votes for Women, an exhibition about women's fight for suffrage over the last 100 years. The Natural History Museum is known for dinosaurs and gems, but we also have a really wonderful history collection. And so this exhibition gives us an opportunity to pull out some really meaningful objects that talk about this important issue, women's right to vote. And so this exhibition focuses on stories of women in Los Angeles County who, over the last 100 years, fought for change for themselves, their families, and their communities. So this exhibition is different than any of the others that talk about the passage of the 19th Amendment because we're focusing on the last 100 years. One of the stories we really want to tell is that not everyone got the right to vote in 1920. Some women had the right to vote earlier and some much, much later. In California, in 1911, women voted for the first time. Before women got the right to vote nationally, there was a state-by-state campaign where women fought to vote. So these are all from 1911 or 1910, when women in California were fighting for suffrage. So this actually was successful. Women in California earned the right to vote in 1911, about 9 years before the rest of the country. So one of the really fun things that we have in our collection is a lot of political memorabilia. So we found this Walter Mondale, Geraldine Ferraro bumper sticker in our collection, and we realized that we had to pull it out. Geraldine Ferraro was the vice president on the Walter Mondale presidential ticket in 1984, and she was the first woman to be on a major party ticket. You know, the fight for voting rights didn't end in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment. So we have this photo from 1991 that shows Gloria Molina celebrating a victory. One of the reasons people were afraid of women gaining the right to vote was because they were afraid that women would vote as a bloc and so would gain an automatic majority. What turned out to be the case is that women don't actually vote as a bloc and have many different political opinions and views. And one of the things we really want people to walk away with is understanding that everyday actions of courage can make a difference in your community. I really like pointing out to people the yearbook foreword, which we did a reproduction of in this case. And you get to hear the words of the students that were going through this really difficult ordeal. So this photo is from 1963, the same year that the Equal Pay Act was signed into law. And in this section of the exhibition, we talk about women in the workplace and the fact that sometimes just asking for a raise or asking for a promotion is an act of bravery. In World War II, thousands of women entered the workforce. And this was an incredible opportunity for women who were trying to make money to support their families and have a better life. And then we also have a photo of women in the Douglas Aircraft Factory riveting on airplanes. So in this section, we talk about women in the workforce. And one of the objects we have here is a police woman's uniform. This would have been worn by a woman named Laura Oakley, who was the chief of police in Universal City. And this is her badge. The items in this case are from our community section, and they were owned by a woman named Gloria Arianes. She started the Barrio Free Clinic in East Los Angeles, which gave affordable health care to people in that community. She was also a member of the Brown Berets, Chicano rights movement, and this is her beret that she would have worn, and then buttons that she also owned. So we start the exhibition in 1920, and we end it in 2020 with the police reform protest being held nationwide. This photo is of Patrisse Cullors, who is a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement in Los Angeles. And we really hope that visitors leave this exhibition realizing that there's so many women that come before us that have done wonderful work, important work in their communities, and there's a lot more that women have to do.
Hi there. I'm Lori Bettison-Varga, President and Director of the Natural History Museums, and I'm here with Supervisor Holly Mitchell, who was elected in November to represent the 2 million residents of the 2nd District of Los Angeles County. Supervisor Mitchell joins the 4 other supervisors, all women, running the most populous non-state government entity in the United States and the 3rd largest metropolitan economy in the world. Wow, that's pretty heady. That's heady stuff. Now, before that, you served for 7 years as state senator for the 30th District, and you held the distinction of being the first African-American to serve as chair of the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, leading the passage of state budgets, each totaling over $200 billion for the 5th largest economy in the world. That's incredible. What a responsibility. So first, I want to say thank you for joining me this evening. It really is so exciting to have you with us. For our viewers, the Natural History Museum is an international, regional, and county institution. We have a physical seat in the 2nd District. It's our hyper-local neighborhood. And you have been so supportive of us as a state senator, and now we're just delighted to have you as the 2nd District Supervisor. And we know you will continue to be an advocate for us. And I'm looking forward to the conversation with you tonight.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate being here. And I gotta say, it did my heart good when I drove down Exposition Boulevard and saw that the 2 dinosaurs were wearing their masks.
Yes, indeed.
Being safe. So thank you for that. It was a good reminder to us all.
Yes, and we are excited to welcome people back indoors beginning April 1st with safety first for everybody. So, and they do look good out there, don't they? They're styling.
Beautiful. They're purple and kind of an aqua green. They look great.
Yep. Well, we like to have fun at NHM. So, well, first, I want to take a moment because, it seems like every program we've started in the last, 12 plus months have been, this is like no other time. And we already know that, okay? But I just want to take a moment and say, the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic, access to the vaccine, the murder of George Floyd, a long history of anti-Black racism, hate, and violence, that we've been reckoning with, the mass shootings in Atlanta, the intersection of race, gender, and class, the rise in anti-Asian racism and hate. There's so much pain right now in the community. And I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that people in the audience are feeling that pain. I also want to say that you represent hope. And that's really important. And I think I want you to explore that for a minute. How does that feel? What does that responsibility feel like to you? I don't think you've ever shirked from that responsibility. So,
well, I appreciate you having that perspective and sharing that perspective. You know, as I listen to you go down the list of all of the assaults to our psyche, to our minds, to our very bodies, it can be overwhelming. And I think it's also important to recognize that for some, this feeling of overwhelm is new, certainly newer than others. There are some communities that this is not new, that the effects of implicit and explicit bias, the effects of structural racism, the effects of white supremacist ideology have plagued our communities for far too long. Generations, to be blunt. And so this notion of anti-Asian sentiment, this sexist ideology that we're witnessing in this country is not new. The question for me is, how will our response be new and different this time? How will we react and dismantle structures that perpetuate those kinds of attitudes and actions, and in fact, perpetuate and protect them and encourage them? And so the question, I think, for me and for all of us, quite frankly, Lori, is how will our response be different this time? That's the way I think about it and approach it. I think that's the way I think about policies and work I can do in my new seat with the Board of Supervisors. Exciting work with a county that's got a Women and Girls Initiative, a county that has an anti-racism initiative and an anti-Blackness segment of that initiative, a county that's been progressive and aggressive in our effort to understand the realities of a carnal system that is incarcerated far too many young people and people of color and poor people. And what do we do as a county to dismantle that and create structures and programs that are truly helpful and are a real safety net, as opposed to a net that holds people in government systems. And so there's great opportunity. And I think it's not just my responsibility, although I don't shy away from it, but everybody has a role to play. Every resident of this county can think about and take action on what they can do different to create the kind of county we all want to raise our children in and grow old in. Everybody has a role to play in that.
I think that's absolutely right. And one of the things that we've been talking about in the museums, we've done a lot of community engagement work, but this moment was really also about introspection, reflection, interrogation,
truth telling to ourselves and others.
Exactly. And honesty, really, and openness, and really wanting to become, as a community, a learning place, because we're all at different places in our journey. But yet we have a responsibility to the county and to Angelenos to make sure that we're helping to break down those barriers that we have. So as you think about the museum and the way that you hope that we reopen, because we've been thinking a lot about this, there's not going back to normal. There is no back to normal.
And frankly, that shouldn't be our goal, because normal didn't work for too many people. Normal kept too many kids and Angelenos out of your museum spaces. And so this is an opportunity to create our new normal that's much more inclusive and welcoming.
Absolutely. And that is one of our 4 values, inclusive. Our other ones are adventurous and intentional and authentic. So it's really important that we do that in an authentic way. So we've been thinking a lot about that, but also, you know, I know in terms of the issues that are confronting the county and our neighborhood, how we can be a support system, how do we meet the needs of our hyperlocal community and broader than that across the county. So we're thinking a lot about that. So as you came into politics, Holly, tell us a little bit about what got you motivated.
You know, it's interesting. I think I've told you the story that my mother worked there at the Natural History Museum as a very young girl down in the basement. Apparently there was a job there where you know, she talked about brushing the fossils with soft brushes. And that's because, and she worked there because she went to Jefferson High School and LA City College and then USC. I think she may have worked there with her first year or 2 at SC. But that's because the family house was on 39th and Budlong. So Expo Park was kind of, you know, their stomping ground. My mom was working at your museum and her cousin Danny, my second cousin Danny, was a lifeguard at the swimming pool there at Expo Park. That space has always been sacred to me in terms of my own family history. But, you know, she left there and had a full career in public service. And she and my father actually met as eligibility workers working for LA County Department of Public Social Services. So for me, from a very young age, I think I understood that the role of government was to help people who needed it. And people who worked for government, it was your job to help people. That was my whole orientation, since all the adults in my life either worked for the county or they were on the county. And there was no distinction made between those 2 categories. And just very early on, I remember struggling with understanding the effects of Prop 13 as a school-age kid. When I began to notice distinct differences in my community of Leimert Park and other areas of the city, when library hours were reduced, when nighttime lights in the park were cut off, when you went to school and you'd ask your teacher for another colored pencil or some construction paper, you know, teachers, oh, thanks to Prop 13, we don't have those things. So you start to ask, what the hell is Prop 13? And why is it impacting me with my, you know, 5th, 6th grade self in this way? And I began to connect those dots and heard a member of the Congressional Black Caucus give a speech. I was probably in high school. Who defined politics as the process by which who gets what when. And I understood that there was bodies of government that made decisions about our lives. And when I began to look at the images and the pictures of those bodies of government, they didn't appear particularly representative. And I think all of that together at various stages of my life and development influenced my decision to really commit my professional career to public service. And I've only worked for government, the legislature, nonprofit advocacy, and now as an elected official.
Well, public service is such a 24/7 job, right?
Tell me about it.
I was going to say. So when you commit to that, and I know you've had a long day, right? Every day is a long day because you serve the public, right? So how, I mean, a lot of women have a hard time.
Lori, it is so fascinating. I have to tell you. So, you know, you join the Board of Supervisors and you think you know the job.
Oh, right.
The things I have learned in under 100 days. Today was a Metro board meeting where we're talking about safety in public transit and how you define safety. The sanitation board. I just can't, LAFCO. I mean, you know, there are elements of government that we don't think about until it's a time such as this when we need government. And for me to watch the public health department work side by side with Office of Emergency Services, working side by side with the fire department, elements of jobs that we as lay people never consider, but how they've come together in this dual public health and economic pandemic to provide nurture and care to our residents is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So the people who, seem to think, well, government has no impact on me. I don't know who can say that to themselves anymore, given the kind of year we've had. There are segments of our population who rely on government and government services and public institutions, such as the museum, and there are others that don't. But, for schools to shut down, for us to experience the shutdown we did, people should have a deeper appreciation and understanding the role of government plays in all of our lives.
Yeah, and not just the shutdown, right? Because there's recovery. The recovery is going to take all of that and all of us. So it's well. Let me just go back to what you said, because I've often thought this. You don't know what it is until you get into it, right? Like till you're in the chair. So in your role, in my role, I mean, a lot of people have ideas about what decisions we should be making. And you have to make a lot of decisions, right? So what advice do you have to your constituents who, they might question some of the decisions? What advice do you have about how to get the information they need to understand the complexity?
Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. And the reality is we live in a democracy, and I would not want to live or work in any other form of government, quite frankly. And that's a two-way street. And I remember telling people a year ago, as I was working very hard to come to the county, that it's a two-way street, and you can't hold me accountable to a measure that you don't help me establish and frame. Mm-hmm. You can't expect me to read the mind of 2 million constituents and know, Lori would want me to do A, B, and C. And so you have to engage. The beauty of democracy is it is for the people, by the people. Mm-hmm. And so you elect us, and then you have to engage with me. And we do all that we can, from teletown halls to town halls to newsletters to email to websites, to try to keep people informed about what we're doing. And I'm really very open to hearing from constituents. I think that there are some segments of our community who feel empowered and do that better than others. Mm-hmm. And then it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I am creating every opportunity and availing myself and my staff to every corner of my district, so people see me, get a sense of the fact that they know me, and understand the county level of government. Right. So they understand what to come to me for. I got to tell you what can be so frustrating. A couple things. When we put forward programs and services to help the community, and they don't know about them and don't know how to avail themselves, frustrates me to no end. The other piece is when people come and find you at whatever level of government you are, but their ask is out of your purview. Mm-hmm. So when I was in the Senate, we used to do Coffee with Holly when I was your neighbor right there. My district office was there in Expo Park. And once a quarter, we do Coffee with Holly. Constituents could come, spend 5 minutes with me to talk about anything. 9 times out of 10, it was a local issue or a federal issue. Right. And so really helping people understand the different levels of government and our sphere of influence, so they know who to talk to and about what to get an immediate result.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, that your work is also about educating, and your whole team is there to help educate and communicate. Of course, it is a two-way street. It's my responsibility to look for the information as well, and it should be accessible and readily available. Right. So it is a dialogue, and in a perfect world, it would be that simple, right?
I agree. But like when I try to talk to people about what the county does, so people, okay, Congress, the president, got it down pat. I think people understand mayor, city council, because that's what they see the most. When you get into county and the state legislature, sometimes it can get kind of fuzzy. And so when I say things like, oh, the Natural History Museum, oh, Park and Rec, county libraries, oh, Hollywood Bowl, oh.
Yeah.
And so I always try to give people kind of a physical landmark to understand this is the jurisdiction of county government and what we do.
It's huge. So you put yourself out there, you're in the role. What do you think, what did you learn from your time in that really important role with budget? What did you take away from that that you can apply in this situation? Because that was a really powerful and important role you played.
And, you know, Lori, I went there with the full intention of chairing budget committee.
Yeah.
I just have to tell you.
I've read that.
When I made the decision to run in 2008 or 9, it was because I had been sitting in a budget subcommittee and watched 3 people eliminate $1 billion out of subsidized childcare.
Yeah.
You know, I was running Crystal Stairs at the time. And I thought, wow. And it was during the state's Great Recession. Times were tough.
Mm-hmm.
The legislature was split. It took 2/3 vote to pass a budget. There were a number of structural issues that complicated, you know, the decisions they were making, and the state was broke, to be perfectly frank. But it was in that moment that I decided to run for office, because I wanted to bring my life's work and experience and the lens through which I view policymaking and the communities who are impacted to that conversation, because sometimes I just felt it was missing.
Yeah.
I also knew that the pendulum would swing back.
Right.
And I wanted to be there and be in a position to help frame and shape how we would invest in California again. And I had the pleasure of having that opportunity and serving 10 years in the legislature. Those first couple of budgets were still tough ones where we cut. But from that point, we were able to invest and invest smart. So, you know, I learned about smart investments. I learned about the value of paying down debt. I learned about how you frame and that government spending really is an investment in her citizenry.
Mm-hmm.
And when you frame it that way and understand that even as an elected official, a policymaker, I am paying it forward to a time when I won't be in the position anymore.
Right.
But it's what's in the best interest of our communities, of our county, of our state. And so those are the things I learned. I learned that, you know, the devil is in the details. And, yes, you know, anything that's worth its weight in policy is going to have a price tag. And I learned not to be afraid of big numbers.
Yeah, there you go.
We would have terminology in the budget process. Somebody would give you a number. Oh, that's budget dust. I learned to not be afraid of big numbers. We're a big state. We're a big county. And we have significant investments. And sometimes, you know, my mother used to say, you know, it takes money to make money. And sometimes you have to invest big for an equally as big return. And I think managing a budget process with, you know, the $220+ billion budget made me not afraid of big numbers.
Well, that's good. Well, one thing I know about budgets is they should reflect your values.
That
right?
goes without saying. That goes without saying.
And the other thing I know is if you don't ask, you don't get. So now, as you know, because I was up there talking with you about our projects. And I think the other thing, I love the way you frame that it's not just for what's happening today. When you create a budget, any budget, whether it's just for the Natural History Museums or, you know, for the county, you have a dual purpose. It's what's happening today, and it's also laying the groundwork for what's happening in the future. Because like you say, what's happening today is real, but there is a future, and it's hard to know how to manage that crystal ball, right? We don't have one.
That sense of balance. You know, you've
right.
got the examples of where you've had to do major infrastructure improvements. You
right.
know, I remember when the museum shut down for a number of years for major, you know, renovation. That was an investment in the future for
right.
future Angelinos to come and experience the magnificence of the Natural History Museum and all of your properties. And so it really is, government builds things. We build systems and we build infrastructure, and we have to build it to last because we are using public dollars to do so. And so we have to be thoughtful and strategic in terms of how we invest those dollars that belong to you and me.
Yeah, that is a responsibility. We do. So I wanted to talk about a really important act that was passed, that California was the first state to pass, that you brought forward. And I know only 8 states have passed the Crown Act. We got 42 more to go. Like, what the heck what's taken? At any rate, so I think this act, some people in the audience are going to know what it is, others aren't. It is really important for us to understand what this act is about, and it forces us to think about our standard of beauty, right? Not just explicit bias and discrimination, but about implicit or unconscious bias that might impact our hiring decisions, as well as about the buildup of microaggressions that Black, Indigenous, and people of color face on a daily basis. So it's really an important act. Could you take just a few minutes and talk with me about this act and how important it is?
So before I talk about the Crown Act, let me just say a statistic I just got yesterday. Higher Heights, an organization I'm a member of that encourages and supports Black women to run for public office all across the country. In their newsletter on Equal Pay Day, which was yesterday, the day before, 82 cents on the dollar for white women. Equal Pay Day doesn't happen for me till August. Yeah. They talked about over the past year, almost 3 million women have been driven out of the workforce due to the pandemic. Black women have suffered the worst unemployment levels since the crisis began, and now face the slowest employment recovery. When we talk about wealth disparities and the wage gap, Black women really suffer. So you have to think about, all the things you talked about, and employment opportunities, and what are things that keep us out of the job market. And as trivial as it may sound, sometimes it's our hair. And so the Crown Act, Crown is an acronym. It stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. And we realize that there are so many workplace dress codes and school dress codes that opined about a hairstyle, Lori, where Black girls were being suspended from school at a disproportionate rate than any of their other female peers based on hairstyle, because their mothers chose to send them to school with their hair in braids or twists or locks, the way I've worn more in my hair for the last 17 years. We realize that for Black people, hair is a political statement and has been a source of oppression for 400 plus years. And that hair texture shouldn't be an indicator of one's ability to do a job.
Right.
I think it's pretty safe to say that there is not a single member of the legislature who said, I am not going to vote on that Mitchell bill, or I'm not going to vote on that budget that Mitchell's presenting because of her hairstyle. That just wouldn't occur to anybody. So the Crown Act basically protects natural hair and natural hairstyles in the workplace. We acknowledge that hair is a race-based trait. That's a statement of fact. And as a result, it should be protected under fair employment and housing codes, just like age, gender, race, sexual orientation, and religion. So that's the history behind the Crown Act. We were eliminating a discriminatory practice where people were either not hired, written up, not promoted, or suspended from school because of the way they chose to wear their hair. You may remember, Lori, the young wrestler from New Jersey, who we all saw, that video went viral, where the referee said he was not qualified to wrestle, even though he had a protective headgear on that's common in wrestling. And you saw the woman come on the mat and hack his hair away. That's an example of what the Crown Act would have protected, that he had the right to wear his hair in its natural state and a protected hairstyle, locks. That's the Crown Act.
But so it's still, I mean, they're still moving this forward in 42 states.
Oh, Lori, I can't tell you the conversations and the messages I've heard from legislators across the country who can't get it set in committee, whose governors have sent signals that they won't sign it. And, you know, you got to wonder why. It just goes to show you that we have a lot of work to do around equity, around race relations, around compassion, and cultural competency. Like I said, what difference, you know, there's nothing, you know, how do we define your hairstyle as professional and mine not?
Right.
What standard are we using to make that assertion? I think it's a Euro standard. It's antiquated. And the time has come to really have an open, frank conversation about what's acceptable in the workplace. And like you said, how we define beauty. You know, it's fascinating that the natural hair industry, this is truly a movement. You know, I remember in the day when you'd walk down the aisle at your drugstore, and there would be one little section for natural hair products. Well, when an industry understands it's a movement, you can tell, because now it's aisle after aisle after aisle. When private sector understands that a group of people are embracing their natural hair, we're no longer chemically straightening it. If you follow that, you understand it's a movement. And so employers and school officials are going to have to figure it out. And legislatures and rulemaking bodies are going to have to figure it out.
Well, I mean, to me, it's just, well, it's unbelievable, right? You would just think that once you have the conversation about it and people have that moment where they say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that for people who truly it's unconscious. I mean, explicit is a whole nother thing, right?
Well, that's why I thought it was great. Dove, the cosmetics brand, had done a survey of Black women about their hair and found that, you know, we felt that we couldn't go to work. And so it was a Dove, the COO of Dove, who I was at a luncheon, heard about this study, and they were looking for legislators to talk about it. And I thought, well, I am the perfect one. My entire elected career, I've had natural hair. And so I thought, how powerful for me to stand in committee on the floor and in a form educate my colleagues. For me to be a living example, for them to think, it would never occur to me, like the example I gave, to not vote on a Mitchell bill because of her hairstyle. That's not a standard they use with anyone else. And that's the nature of my work. And so I thought, what a perfect living example that I could show. This is what we're talking about, what happens in the workplace and schools everywhere. And so it was an important conversation. I was thrilled that the governor signed it and California became the first state. And in his bill signing ceremony, he talked about that people may trivialize this and say, well, it's just hair, change your style. And he says, no, it's about discrimination. It is a form of discrimination, plain and simple.
Right. Well, it's really important. And I hope people are in the audience thinking about it. If they don't know about it, they can look it up. There's a great website with a lot of information about it. And to think, you know, really take a moment and reflect on the critical nature of this act, and what it says is so much more. And I think that's really important. So I know it's kind of amazing to me that we've already been talking for 30 minutes.
Because, you know, I'm happy, Lord, to get me going.
I love it. And I have so many more questions for you, but I think we have one from the audience too. So I'm looking for that. Here we go. All right. So here's from the audience. To those newly interested in running for office at a local level for the first time, motivated by recent events, what are some surprises you would tell them to prepare for should they get elected?
Well, the first thing they should do is come to the Natural History Museum and see that wonderful exhibit we just saw the video on. I can't wait to come see the exhibit, well, the whole thing. And I saw so many familiar faces, Patrice Cullors, Maria Elena Durazo, a current sitting state senator when she was an organizer, probably with Unite Here. I just can't wait to see it. So I think, you know, it's important to appreciate the shoulders that we stand on. I was on a Zoom yesterday with the the Women's Foundation of California, and there was Joy Pikus, one of the first women elected
Yep.
to LA City Council. I'm like, I stand on your shoulders as an elected woman here in my hometown. And so I think it's important that people understand what they're getting into, that they're really clear about what office they're choosing to pursue, because you've got to follow your passion. If your passion is, education policy, look at the school board. If your passion is zoning and construction, look at the city council. Making sure you are running for the right office based on what is encouraging you to run for office. I think there's got to be a match. Know that it's hard work. I know I make it look glamorous, but it's really not.
You do make it look glamorous.
It's 7 days a week. It's full time. It's which is what it takes to truly serve and represent 2 million people. And so people have to understand that. I'm always, really spend a lot of time with women, particularly who come to me who are interested in running for office, because I want to talk to them and prepare them about, your family, your children. I think, we hold women to a different standard in public office than men. Be prepared for that. How does that sit with you? How do you confront it? How do you manage it? Where do you go for support? And so those are all important things, I think, for people to think about, and reach out to someone who's elected and ask them to give you an informational interview. It's easy now over Zoom. Spend 15 or 20 minutes, kind of talk through what you're thinking about. I had amazing mentors, elected and those who worked in government, who allowed me to see up close and personal what this life was like. So I'm clear that I walked into it eyes wide open. Although it's unique to be in public office these days, with the kind of public sentiment and, quite frankly, the public vitriol we're all witnessing and experiencing. So it's different. You put yourself out there in a unique kind of way, which is why it has to really be your passion, and you really have to have the desire to serve.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, obviously, even when it comes to applying for positions, women tend to hold themselves to a different standard than men might. We always we think we're not good enough, and we have to get beyond that and take the opportunity and the chance, say yes when the opportunity is given, and put ourselves out there.
Absolutely. The Center for the American Woman in Politics at Rutgers University has done research for decades out of their institute around what motivates, and they track the number of women. After every election cycle, they release a report. How many women mayors and governors there are, how many women are holding constitutional statewide office. So they're showing the progress we've made, and it's been lots of peaks and valleys. California now has the largest women's caucus in our state legislature than ever. But there were a number of years where our numbers dropped pretty dangerously low.
Right.
And so Rutgers has done surveys of women over the years and have found that there's a pretty consistent pattern. Women typically have to be asked. We have to be asked repeatedly.
Yeah.
We typically run for levels of government where there's a personal connection. That's why I mentioned school board. We have kids, our kids are in school. We don't like what we see, you run for school board. And so there really is a pretty consistent set of kind of factors that motivate women and that apply to women. I told you my story. I was running Crystal Stairs, saw the budget action. I understood what that would do to working families in LA County. I made the decision to run. And so this notion of us having to be asked, I think we have to get over that. I think we also have to look at the skill set we have and what we bring to these policy-making decisions. My budget experience, my being a good employer experience, my organizing experience, my policy setting experience, most of which was nurtured in the nonprofit organizations I ran and worked at. So I think women need to think differently about our capacity and our skill set and life experience and work experience, and how that is directly applicable to the policy making and policy setting arena.
Such great advice. What about the environment now? And I'm going to say it's been, we know that politics has always been difficult. You're a public person, you get a lot of criticism. We've had examples. I mean, when I was president of Scripps College, Gabby Giffords was shot. There are vulnerabilities. You put yourself out in the public space. How did you get, do you get past that to thinking about the people protesting on your front lawn and, okay, I got boundaries. I mean, there's so many elements to this when you're putting yourself in public service, you run for office, and then you take all of the good things that you're doing and you've got this purpose and that's driving you forward. But there's got to be moments where it's like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
And I think that the end goal, Lori, is so critically important to my community.
Right.
Our state's Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, who I had the pleasure of serving within the legislature when she was in the assembly, used to always say, people say, oh, it was really courageous of you to introduce that bill. And she says, that wasn't courageous. My father raising his family and leaving Alabama, I think, and bringing us to Los Angeles, that was courage.
Mm-hmm.
This portrait behind me here in my dining room, because I'm working safe from home today, is Rosa Parks. Miss Parks showed and exhibited courage. I have my Shirley Chisholm pin on today.
Oh, yeah.
First Black woman elected to Congress, first Black woman to run for president.
Amazing.
Shirley Chisholm exhibited courage. And so I think, it's never easy. There are always challenges. There will always be people who want to defend the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And the status quo, Lori, doesn't embrace or support me or people who look like me or the community I represent. And so it always has been and probably always will be a bit of an uphill challenge. But I think about the stories of these women.
Yeah.
And the courage, and as Dr. King says, the intestinal fortitude that it took for them to get up and engage and organize and fight the good fight every day is fundamentally what I'm supposed to do on behalf of my community. There are too many children who don't know the Natural History Museum is potentially within walking distance of
exactly. Yep.
And so you and I have a responsibility
to
change that for them and the next generation.
No, I was just going to say,
we keep on keeping on.
Well, we got to lock arms, right? I mean, this isn't just about you. This is about all of us. We got to lock arms and get this done. It's really, and it's continuing. It's not ever going to be done, right? We just got to keep moving forward. And that is, and we've got to lock arms with you. You're not alone in this. And we know that. You're so inspiring. And I know you love spending time with young people. I know you spend a lot of time on college campuses and with college students. And, what message do you have for them? I know we want to wrap up here pretty soon. So, I think they've taken this all in, but it's the corridor transformation. Those years are really important years. And
well, it's really a two-way street. I spent a lot of time down the street from you at Mount St. Mary.
Yeah.
I've had a fun relationship with them. I'm their faculty in residence, where I get to spend time about once a quarter or so engaging with students and coming to talk, because I think proximity is important. To give young people proximity to leadership and leaders. When I was in school, we read about them in textbooks, and I think I had a woman elected official show up for my commencement speech, but I'd never had the opportunity to engage and ask questions. And so, particularly for that campus where it's all-female campus and largely first-generation college attendees, to be proximate to what leadership looks like, to really challenge themselves and their own assumptions about leadership, and to challenge me and my assumptions about them and the future is really important. So to have opportunity to have conversation, I learned so much. It's important to me too, to try to help me be young and hip, which is my goal, Lord. Stay young and hip.
Absolutely.
It's a losing battle, but I'm trying.
Oh, you do a great job.
It's a reciprocal relationship. I think they learn from me and I learn from them.
Well, and I just want to say shout out to Mount St. Mary's. They do educate the women of Los Angeles, and Ann McElhaney Johnson's a dear friend of mine. I adore her, and so I have followed the work you've done with them, and I know how important it is to the students there to have your presence and engagement and encouragement. So, okay, let's take the last few minutes here and tell us what you do for fun.
So this is really funny. So, well, two things. I played the piano, not because I wanted to, it's because I have large hands, and my dad figured anybody with fingers this long is supposed to play piano. So you know your parents put you in something.
Oh yeah.
I never wanted to do it. I was always intrigued by the drums. So for my 50th birthday several years ago, I got myself drum lessons.
Oh wow.
For the record, it's harder than it looks.
I have a feeling that's true.
It's very hard. I asked this question of Betty Yee, our state treasurer, in a little thing I used to do, sipping my tea on Sundays. Well, did StreamYard, and something we started during the pandemic, and it was just to have conversation. It was a way to update my constituents on what was happening when I was in the legislature.
Yep.
And we started inviting people to come and talk. And so Treasurer Betty Yee came to really talk about what she was doing to keep the state solvent during that difficult time. And I asked her, what do you do for fun? And Betty, who I've known for 30 years, who's brilliant, just warm and engaging, brilliant writer on Sunday. She has a podcast now on Sundays on her Facebook page. She just does beautiful writings. When Betty said she hula hoops, I almost fell out my chair. Hula hoop.
Wow.
So she sends me a hula hoop. So that's my new fun thing. I try to hula hoop.
Yeah. Now, you know what? I have to just say, my daughter's boyfriend, I think, was involved in a hula hoop championship at some point. So it's kind of a thing. Maybe I'll get a hula hoop in him.
Lori, it's harder when you're older than when you were younger.
You know what? Maybe I don't want to try.
I'm just saying it's harder, Lori. And it's funny because, and then, I love to read and all those kinds of good things. But, over a year ago, if you'd asked me that question, my answers would have been very different. This year of shaking up our sense of normalcy and making us think differently and finding different things to do within the confines of your own four walls has really challenged us all.
It's so funny. I have to say you're right, because I've gotten into jigsaw puzzles. Like, I have done so many jigsaw puzzles in the last, year. And I finally decided that it's the only thing I can control. Like, I can find that piece and put it where it goes. And when it's done, it's so satisfying. It's like, I finished it. It's done. I can control the process.
Isn't that fascinating?
Isn't it?
And a year and a half ago, that would have never occurred to you. A year and a half ago, I would have talked about, I love the theater and I go to the movies and I love live music. I love summertime outdoor concerts. I love to travel. None of those could I do in this last year. None of them.
Yeah, right.
It's been fascinating kind of self-discovery and for me to slow down in a way. And I learned about Zoom and StreamYard and technology and had to buy a circle light and all these things.
That's right. Well, and I've been wearing
everyday life.
I've been wearing jeans to work, which is great. Like, what am I going to do when I have to wear regular pants and not my jeans? So we all have these things to confront as we reopen and recover. And I'm looking forward to having you over to see the exhibit. We were going to have to close it before anybody could see it. And we got an extension on the loans. It's been in the dark since the entire time we put it in, no lights on. So we're really excited to have the exhibition open through mid-fall, and I'm excited to have you come see it. And
I'm excited to come see it, and I'm excited that we're going to begin to move into conversations around recovery.
Yes.
The American Rescue Plan, is that what it's called?
Yep.
is going to be a game changer for all of
It
us. It's
is.
a game changer for government. Resources to help small businesses, resources really across the board to, again, invest in people. And when you talk about a $3 trillion commitment, what that means to our state government, county, every city practically in this state, not having resources will not be our excuse for once.
Right. Well, and I have to tell you, I was so excited today to hear that I'm eligible April 1st for a vaccine.
How about that?
Yay! And April 15th, they're saying 16 and over. I mean, yeah, it's feels hopeful.
We're
There's
getting
a
there.
lot
We're
work to
getting,
do.
we're getting
It
there.
feels hopeful.
And it's
Really
the county
does.
that's building the infrastructure. And we
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
working. I can't think of another example where we have worked across government jurisdictions. From FEMA, I did a pop-up vaccination site in partnership with FEMA, the State
Yeah.
Office of Emergency Services, me, and a nonprofit organization, Community Coalition, and Charles Drew Medical School. Like, what kind of project would, I've done another pop-up site with other community-based organizations and LAUSD, St. John's, Kedron. I mean, we have gotten creative in bringing the services and resources to the people who need it the most. And so I look forward to continuing to be creative and finding new partners to make sure that everyone has a place to go come April 15th to get the shot in the arm, because that's what's most important, that everybody has access.
That's right.
In their own neighborhood, in their own language, at trusted community partners in their own community. That's the goal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a lot of fun, and I feel like we could keep going on, but we'll have other opportunities. And
hello to the girls at Right Girl. That's an amazing
yes,
organization.
they're
I
amazing.
Supported for a number of years and was actually published in one of their books. They granted me that opportunity. I wrote a letter to my 15-year-old self, but the young women at Right Girl are better writers than I. So hello, Right Girl.
Yes, shout out to Right Girl. Amazing. Thank you so much. And we are so fortunate to have your leadership in the 2nd District and in the County of Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lori. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Bye, everyone.